One. Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of the UK Connections Part 2 from last week. Whoa, we haven't said last week in quite a long time, right? And to help me along with this Part 2 of bands from the UK and the US who had lots of success in one country, but it didn't translate across the pond, Simon Bray and Steven Reid here with me as always. Hello, gentlemen. I was just telling Steven, I just saw you 24 hours ago.
You did, yes, indeed.
I did that.
Bit of
Well,
a
that's right.
shock.
I was thinking that I was like divulging some kind of big secret, but you would have hopefully everybody would have watched For Fusion Friday last night. Got to get all this shit straight here. Last night, and we all just saw each other a week ago because we do the show every other week. But because of this two-parter that we just had to get to before the ideas are not fresh in our heads anymore, so we've decided to do part two of this topic here. But speaking about fresh, before we do that, we have something to take care of first. Simon, what are you drinking?
Do you know that was a magnificently fantastic professional segue into that bit into the bit. Speaking of something
I
for
hang around you so much. I learn these things, right? It's like, it's
almost like you went to university for this shit. It really is. So, yay. So, I have recently been given some gifts. I love gifts, don't you? Especially in the beer-shaped gifts, because you lot pop on about your gifts all the time. So I've got a gift. My gift is from Budapest.
wow.
You know, Budapest is one of my favorite ever places. I vaguely remember going once for my 50th birthday. I believe I was there for a week. I don't know. Then my good friend John G. Simpson brought me back a Budapest Session IPA craft beer, probably called SOR, SOR. There's my camera. There it is.
Thor?
So yeah, there's quite a lot. There's a big amount. No, half a liter. Oh Christ, on a bike. Yeah, hey, it's only 5%, and it's once again suitable for virgins. So good time. Hard by all. I'm gonna pour it. I'm gonna taste it. Hmm, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
My initial my initial reaction would be to try it again
Mhm.
One sip, everybody knows the rules.
several times. Then, like right at the bit at the top, right at the bit at the bottom, put the track listing in, take it. Oh, sorry, I'm not writing a review, am I? Sorry. Yeah, I would, in fact, just give it a 3.25.
Oh, it's okay.
It's good. It's good. It might go up. It might go down. Well, it's going to go down because I'm going to drink it all.
What denomination of beer is it, Simon? I don't know if you said, and I've just brain farted already.
You probably burn voted, but I probably didn't. It's just a session IPA.
It looks like an IPA in the glass then.
I thought it was a session because it's very light in color. Usually the session IPAs are pretty kind of pale almost.
Mm.
Indeed. So, well, I mean, you've got a gift from Budapest. I have a gift from Dobby's Garden Centre.
But Dobby's dead.
Well, yes. Is he?
I wish I knew what you guys are talking about, but who's this Dolby character?
I don't know if I can carry on. Right.
I'm gonna have to
Anyway,
carry on because I got to know what the hell we're talking about here.
oh, so don't worry, we don't know either. So you're fine, Pete.
Oh,
So
okay. All right.
here we go.
Dobby's a Harry Potter character. He's dead.
Oh, that Dolby. Okay. All right. Now
Yeah, but he doesn't have garden centres. No. Okay.
maybe he
So
died. Didn't he die in a garden? I don't know.
Spencer.
I don't remember where he died. Anyway, I'm confusing the matter more. Like, I'll just
this is a long build-up of some of the worst puns you're ever going to read. Okay, this was bought for me as a present from a garden centre. Therefore, it's called sheer genius because he's got shears in his hands. Like, I mean, come on.
that's pretty hokey.
My life has been wasted. I could do this shit. I could do this shit. Okay, what is it? Expertise developed through trial and error. Trial and
Oh my Lord. Well, you know,
okay, and
trying to be a little
Not
cute
funny.
about
It's not funny.
no, it's not. It's not. It's not. It's a smooth ruby ale. Okay, 4.5%, and it's from the bottle shop. by Cottage Delight. It's probably not really. It's probably made by a real brewer, and they're just not telling you who. The real brewer doesn't want their name on this. Okay.
God, I
So,
hope I hope the beer is at least passable after all that.
well, it looks nice in the glass. It's a ruby ale. Okay, so it looks nice.
Okay.
It looks okay. It smells good. That is better than anticipated. That is a fair to middling. Isn't that a nice gift? You drink it and you go, yes, it is. Thank you very much. And it genuinely is. I mean, it's not exciting. We're not going to set the world on fire. It tastes like beer. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those. It just is. It's in the class. It's pleasant. It's nice. It's a 2.754 all day long. It's
Oh,
nothing spectacular, but it's not terrible. There you go.
I don't know if I've ever seen anything called a ruby ale here. You know, red ale, yes, I'm sure it's not much different than that, but ruby,
We get red ales here too. It's a little darker. It's
yeah,
not quite. I mean, there is. It's slightly more opaque.
yeah.
Yes. So
oh, whoa. Um, you got this from a garden centre. Well,
yes.
my friend that went all the way to Budapest to get me, give me that,
Yep.
lives in Scotland, lives, in Dundee. And he brought me, amongst the other stuff that he brought me, from the bottle shop, North Pole Smooth Ruby Ale.
Now I would guess that
It's
this
the
is
same,
exactly the same drink
same
that's in
shit
here.
with five, 4.5
4.5
Smooth Ruby Ale.
smooth ruby ale.
Wow, how weird is that? You
Suitable
did not
for
plan that, folks.
vegetarians.
Pardon?
Suitable for vegetarians on the side. Mother. Oh,
It
maybe it's
doesn't
not.
specifically say it, but it will be.
Swinging into Christmas. So, right, the cheapskate went to a fucking garden centre.
Huh.
Amazing.
So you guys have been talking about getting gifts and things like that. So I will say, and we've been talking about it for months, how my fridge was stock full at the end of last year, beginning of this year, right? Because my brother came over, brought all this beer. I bought all this beer for the holidays, got sick, haven't really been drinking all that much. Well, let me tell you, there ain't much left. And finally, 7 months later, I'm almost out of everything. So if anybody is interested in gifting, I'm all ears. So otherwise, I'm gonna have to go out and like buy beer again for the first time in 2025. I have not actually purchased beer from my beer store this year. So what I'm drinking today, I think I've already had on air before. Maybe you guys will remember. I don't remember, but I'm having a proper English today, which is a British brown ale, 5.2% from our friends over at the Source Farmhouse Brewery, somewhere in New Jersey, Colts Neck, New Jersey. All right. I don't know. My brother finds all these places over there. So I think I know I've had this before because I only had two left and there were four. So I just don't know if I had it here. So it kind of looks like Stevens a little bit. It's a brown ale. It's not too dark.
Yours is darker, I think.
Yeah, could be. Could
Yep.
be. It smells very malty. It tastes very malty. It's very good. It's just like a malty British ale. Um, yeah, I've had better, but it's pretty good. I would say this is a 3.25. It's pretty good. I like these. I don't drink a lot of this style, but I do like to have one every so often. It's good. Not too shabby. So I don't know. Did I have this? Did I have this on air before? Does this look familiar? I know we
I,
talk about a lot of beer here, so I know it's probably.
the can or tin, whatever you want, looks familiar.
Yeah, I think I did have this maybe back in February or March or something like that. Yeah, the beer's been sitting around for. I normally don't let beer sit in the fridge for that long, but it's what are you
Yeah,
gonna do?
I have not bought a beer since before December last year.
So you and I are in the same, yeah, I'm gonna have to. Well, I mean, I have cousins coming from out of town, not this weekend, but next weekend. So I obviously am gonna have to stock up before they come. But I haven't bought beer for myself in since like November. So it's been a while. I think all I have left in the fridge is one more of these, one more of the beer I had last week. There's a Heineken in there, which I don't know where that came from. And yeah, exactly. That'll probably get used for cooking. I don't think I'll actually be drinking that. And I think I may have one more of something else. I don't know. Yeah, one more of a lager that I had on air here probably like 3 weeks ago. So yeah, that's it. So this got fresh stuff has got to happen. See, there's that fresh again. So we're continuing on with our discussion of these bands from the UK and from the US who had big success back home, or maybe the opposite, but it didn't translate over. We've already discussed Status Quo and Slade and Styx and who else did we talk about? Yeah,
Oh, I can't remember. That was last week.
that was last week already. Grand Funk Railroad. We talked about the Susie Quattro, and we
Cliff.
talked about Cliff Richard, right? Richard.
Yeah,
So
that's why I tried to forget about the Cliff Richard part.
yeah, well, had to be part of the conversation. So we're going to kind of continue back. We'll start with Simon. So we each have a couple to talk about here today and kind of figure out what the hell happened here, why so big in one place and not in the other. So Simon, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I've been doing the ultimate research this week. Yes, yes, I have. And I have listened to Grand Funk Railroad. And I know why they didn't make it in the UK. Because they're shit.
Oh, come on.
Indescribably awful. That was like 2 hours of my life I will never get back.
So what did you listen to?
Um, the one that has the locomotion on it was terrible. I listened to a hits and I listened to one of the earlier records and oh God, and I was straight on the message to Stephen, wasn't I, Stephen? Oh my God, no,
Yes,
no.
the message that I got said, Stephen, I think you will love what I like to call the funk. And I replied, oh, do you? He went, no, they're shit. That's verbatim, actually.
All right. Well, hey, I tried. I
But
love
before
them.
Simon continues, okay, I'm going to have to tell him off here because I've spent the week going through the comments and I was going to finger wag, okay. I was going to finger wag because there are people, and thank you for the comments. We do appreciate them whether I'm about to be a twat or not, okay. But there are people who have basically summarised that the reason that Kansas or Status Quo or Slade or Styx or whoever weren't big in their respective territory is because they're shit. That's not the point here. Whether you think they're shit or whether you don't, these bands were ginormous in one of these markets,
Yes.
mainly at home, but not always at home. Sometimes in a different market. And the question is whether you and everybody else around about you thinks they're shit. Why would one country think that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Millions of people will think opposite and thought opposite, right? Yeah.
absolutely. So it's really not about whether you, I, they, anybody likes these bands. A lot of people did, and a lot of people didn't somewhere else. Quite weird. Anyway, sorry, Simon.
Well, most people don't actually like anything, So even if you sell 50 million records, there's still 8 billion people not buying it, isn't there?
Right.
So yeah, is it?
But is it because they don't like them or they just never listen to them, right? Because that's a big part of it too.
Or get the chance to listen to them.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at people I get from this country who I hate to always use them as an excuse, but I'm going to, who say, I hate the band Europe. Why do you hate Europe? Oh, because I never need to hear the final countdown again. But yet they don't know anything else by them. So you're judging them based on one song and you haven't investigated anything else, right? But this was a really big band for a while, right? In multiple territories.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Indeed. Talking about really big bands, the Cars. And I've always thought to myself, Simon, you, my friend, you should like the Cars. The Cars should be right up your alley. I love power pop. I like much new wave music. I like clever lyricists and stuff like that. Sometimes, Stephen, I listen to the words. I know. Get that, eh? And for years, I had the Cars' greatest hits on cassette, and I thought, oh, I really don't dig the Cars that much. I did really enjoy Shake It Up. That was great. That really like that. I've got it on car-shaped vinyl somewhere upstairs. Couldn't be asked to dig it out to show you, but I've nonetheless got it. Anyhow, the Cars were really big in America, weren't they?
Oh yeah, yeah.
They really were. The Cars album, 6 times platinum.
Yes.
That is big. UK silver made 18 in America, 29 in the UK. Candy O, there we go. 4 times platinum. That's big. that is big. And then he went, a little bit, Panorama, just platinum. Then he got back up again, Shake It Up, 2 times platinum, and Heartbeat City, 4 times platinum. There
Yeah,
you go.
that was the big one here. Yeah.
No, they were big, weren't they? They were big, but they were not big over here. Although my best friend's girl made number 3, and Drive made number 4 after the video that was shown at Live Aid. So did make some kind of dent, but their albums never made it past number 25 was the biggest of the
See, it's
highest.
perplexing because they were such a singles phenomenon here. And I know that's how important that is over where you're from. So I don't
Mm.
understand why none of these songs like that would captivated audiences here because they were all over the radio, they were all over MTV. And yeah, the album sold well, but they were a song band. They were a singles band, big time.
And I remember seeing some of the videos. But they were a band that made interesting and funny videos,
Yeah.
and they needed to because they didn't leave the States very often, did they?
No, no.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why.
I mean,
You
we've
know,
already talked about that a bunch of times, right? That has a lot to do with this.
exactly. Song-wise, some really, really good stuff. And I'll tell you what, um, they make much more sense on their albums when you listen to the albums than you do when you listen to the greatest hits.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
deep cuts are pretty good, aren't they? I mean, they're glued together by the big hits. But I have thoroughly enjoyed going through the Cars discography, which is quite small, which is a bonus. Maybe they didn't make it because there are other new wavy British bands that could do arsiness as well at the same time. I did read at one point that somebody said they were a little bit too much like The Who. I thought, no, I'm not getting, no, don't get that at all. Then again, we know what I think about The Who. And I get the cleverness a bit like the Kinks. I don't get them either, to be honest. But they
Uncle
never let,
Simon, Uncle
yeah,
Simon, a bit
yes.
like the Who in what way?
I don't know. I just remember reading that they were a bit like the Who in their hooks and stuff like that, and incorporating elements from the Who, which I don't get in any way, shape, or form.
I don't either.
I
That's
really,
I don't really hear anything British about them at all.
no,
no, I'm not an expert on either
that
band, but I don't get that at all. No,
that might be a thing as well. There's for a British audience, there's not that much to kind of grab onto. And other bands of a similar ilk that I really like, never really kind of made it over here. I'm a huge fan of Fountains of Wayne. I really, really love Fountains of Wayne. And they only ever had one hit over here. And they do the whole clever,
Did New
kind of.
Wave in general like really catch on there? Because it was pretty big here for a few years. I mean, I know that the Cars dabbled in New Wave at the beginning, and then they kind of just became like a pop band and a rock band. But like Blondie and all, did any of that stuff really? Yeah.
Blondie were
Blondie were
enormous.
massive. Yeah,
Yeah. And were absolutely enormous from parallel lines onwards, weren't they? They were each of the parallel lines and Eat to the Beat were enormous. They had big hits off Ultra American, and then from the Hunter. No, but they were very very big for a period, weren't they? My Sharona was a hit. They had Skinny Ties, didn't they? That's how we define wave over here, isn't it? Skinny Ties. Um, I know they're not American, but Men at Work were big for a period, weren't they? They were kind of new wavy. Is it again? Is it luck? Is it the fact that they didn't tour over here? Is it their smart arseness? Because the hooks were just there in all the songs, weren't they? They I would have thought radio friendly.
Yeah, maybe
yep.
not. Maybe not the most image conscious band, I'd argue. I mean, they had somewhat of a kind of geeky look to them, but I wouldn't call them like magazine cover band. You know,
No, so in that kind of sense, they kind of like Foreigner Sticks, Journey, all those American kind of faceless kind of acts, but just in a more new wavy kind of way.
yeah, yeah. I like
You
your
know,
comment about the deep tracks because I like, especially if you look at the first album, Candio. I would argue that some of the songs that were not big hits from those albums are really, really good. Really
Yeah.
good.
And the keyboard player is fantastic.
Oh, he's great. Yeah. Yeah.
He-
And guitar
he-
player, yeah, he's
yeah,
amazing.
really, but like I say, didn't translate over here very much.
Yeah. Yeah. They were really big here. I've talked to people though over the years who never really thought Ray or Ben were great singers, and that like is a little blocker for some people. I mean, they both have unique voices,
Yeah.
right? It's this different, but I don't find them unpleasant at all. But I can maybe see some people thinking that. Um, yeah,
Well, here in the UK, they're about, I think, is it next week? Oasis are back. You can't tell me he can sing. Ooh, ooh, you know,
Hmm.
there are plenty of people who can't sing that make it, aren't there? You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
I Sorry, Simon.
no, it's okay. Go on.
No, I was going to say that because we spoke about this last week and we've come back around to do it this week, it's something that has popped into my head as I've been listening to things not really related at all to this, because the band I was listening to have not been successful anywhere. That was Presto Ballet. Okay, so Kurt Van der Hoof of Metal Church, and it's his kind of prog thing, but there are links to Styx and Kansas and so on through that music. And that was what made me think about the topic as I was listening to whichever album it was I was listening to. I thought, this is really optimistic music. Do you know, it's not just upbeat, it's not like a big hit, it's not a summertime thing, but it's optimistic music. It feels hopeful. It has that kind of, I don't know, kind of grasping for something. Do you know, this is aspirational. And I was thinking, how much aspirational kind of upbeat sort of rock music, pop music for the UK, yes. But how much of that kind of feel did we really have here in rock bands in the 70s, say, which is what we've discussed a lot of, and maybe even into the 80s. And it brings me on who I'm going to talk about next, which is Journey, because that's optimistic music.
Oh yeah,
In fact,
yeah,
it's it feels like if you're in a bad mood and you want to put Journey on, it's going to put you in a good mood. It's that kind of music, okay? And we just seem to go about it a bit differently more than anything else. Now, as people have also mentioned in the comments, some of these bands have had success in the other territory. It would be unfair to say that Journey are not a success in the UK, but they've had one top 10 album, okay, which was Frontiers, got to number 6. Escape, Raised on Radio, and quite surprisingly, Eclipse got into the top 35. So, I mean, Eclipse really, by the time we're getting to there, you need to sell about 10 albums to get in the top 35. So that doesn't really count. Don't Stop Believing did get to number 6 in the UK charts, but only in 2009 after Glee. Okay, it went multi-platinum here, but not because it was a Journey song. That's not the reason that it did that. Because apart from that, their highest single chart here was Who's Crying Now, which got to number 46. Okay, now, the thing is, for an AOR band here in the UK, actually, those are pretty decent stats because we never really did AOR here at all. Okay, because you think about Journey and then go and transpose that to the US market, you have 19 top 40 singles, 6 got in the top 10, 52 million album sales in the US. Okay, that makes them in around 10, 11, 12, 13, 14th biggest selling US act of all time.
all time. It's crazy, right? Yeah.
Of all time. Over 100 million records sold globally. And the UK kind of went, yeah, until Glee, right? Oh, right. But yeah, realistically, Foreigner had some presence here, but it took them to get together with a gospel choir for that really to happen. Probably 2 bona fide hits in this market. And it's difficult to find many AOR bands that haven't just kind of had, whoa, and gone over here. We don't really do this optimistic, upbeat. They don't look UK friendly, to be fair. Okay, and that is something, yes, Simon.
I'll tell you who are ultra optimistic, had a couple of hits over here, and then that's it. Survivor. Jim Peterick writes the most optimistic songs of all time. Pride of Lions are just like, whoa, look at us. We're like a show tune band. We're so happy, you know. And quite, Survivor's all about living the dream and pumping it out and stuff like that. And they are the two big hits because from the Rocky the Rocky films, but everything else just went, no, we're just not listening to that.
And
You know,
I
very
mean,
much of that persuasion.
yes, and it took them to be connected to something else that was a success for that to translate into chart success. The film is the success.
Yeah.
This happens to be the song from the film. And that's kind of how it works in that sense. Because even like your rock press over here, Kerrang, during kind of this era, okay, derided AOR. I mean, it was Wimpwire was the kind of standard news section that was there, and smaller bands, kind of middle to smaller bands, and homegrown bands were just derided. They were just there to be taken the piss out of. So that didn't really leave the door open for bona fide manly men, because rock in the UK were manly men. They did not have hair like this. Okay, they did not do that. You went to a gig like this, you might not come home. All right, that's it. Was rock and metal was manly music for manly men back then, and it just seems to be a distinct barrier there. However, let's lump Toto in with this. Okay, so I saw Toto in Glasgow in 2015. Now they formed 38 years prior to that show. It's the first time they played Scotland.
It's crazy.
Okay. Journey are pretty similar. And I'm going to keep it Scotland centric because I'm from Scotland. Okay, so they played two shows here in 1976, one in 1979, and then they played one in 2006. And that was a warm up for a Monsters of Rock one off festival.
That's a
Okay,
big
now,
gulf there.
yeah, now even in London, 27-year gap between a show in 1980 at the Rainbow and 2007 at the Hammersmith Apollo. So why did Journey not break the UK? Because they didn't want to, didn't care. The UK is not a big market. It's a big market in terms of sales compared to most countries because we buy a lot of music here. We consume a lot of music. But in terms of, even in the 70s, you could come and do 15 shows and people will go, wow, bona fide UK tour. It's not like going to the US and saying we need to spend 3 years there. We're going to have to play at least every second day, and we're going to have to really put the time in. We might have to play an afternoon show. We'll have to travel for 400 miles and then set up and play within 10 minutes of turning up. That's not the UK.
Right.
So really, why did bands like Journey and Toto not break the UK? Because they just kind of went, don't really want to. And musically, nobody bought their stuff, so maybe that motivation's not there. It is a two-way street.
Yes.
As we discussed with Slade and things, bands that tried to break the US, if you don't really dig in and do it, you won't do that. And over here, especially in the 70s, you play no live shows, you may sell no albums.
I mean, you bring up a good point about the whole size of the markets, right? The UK market is pretty small.
Yeah.
So that's why I see where a lot of people come with the arguments like, well, they were never anything in the UK. It's like, well, it's a much smaller market. You know, it's like, so you look at it. So if 5 million copies of an album are being sold in the US, that's across the entire US. It's not just coming from New York or California. It's coming from everywhere. So you have to take that into consideration. But yeah, and you have to wonder too if some of the American bands are going to go across the ocean to do some live dates. They may be like, well, we can go play and sell out the Hammersmith Odeon for however many couple of thousand people fit in there, or we can go play a festival in front of 100,000 people in Poland or in Sweden or France or whatever it might be. And that is their big show there.
Or let's look at it from another way around and go, if you are Journey's management label, whatever it may be, and you think, do you know what, if we continue to knock on this door for the US, we're going to end up with 52 million album sales. Okay. At what point do you say, do you know what, see, for the next 3 weeks, 6 months, let's go tour Europe?
What's more important, right?
Would you take that momentum out of things? Would you take that risk of, do you know what, we're hot, 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 album tour, album tour, album tour, album tour. But do you know what? Let's head over there and see what happens. But
It's a
the other
risk.
side of this, which will come with the last one I'm going to talk about too, is that you could be confused for thinking now that these bands were huge over here. Because Journey can come and play the Enormodomes. Okay, my last act was going to be Kiss. They played the biggest venues, indoor venues, that you're going to play in the UK. But they didn't in their heyday. None of these bands did in their heyday. It's a very much a people seem to have a nostalgia for something that didn't happen here,
Right.
which is a bit weird. I like it because it means I saw these bands in big venues, but a bit weird.
So if what is, I'm assuming it's maybe Wembley. If you're playing like the biggest place you could possibly play in the UK, is Wembley the place?
I mean, you can play stadiums here, Pete. So you're talking, I don't know, what 35, 40,000 people in a stadium. But in terms of indoor, probably Wembley Arena. I
I
don't
would
I
I would suggest it's now the Co-op Arena in Manchester.
Yeah. How much does that hold, Simon? Do you know?
Well, I'm glad you asked because once again I've been doing the research. It holds 20,000 seated and 23,000 with people standing. And what I did is I have looked at the people that are playing playing the Coop Arena between Co-op Arena between now and the festive period, and bands that have played there recently. And I think it's quite instructive. So Sleep Token have played, and I remember last week. Actually, it was last week. Last week, Pete, you said I could walk out on the street and ask any Americans, do you know Cliff Richard and no go no. I reckon that despite the fact that
Mm.
Sleep Token have been #1 in the US and the UK at the same time this year, you could do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. And yet, being #1 simultaneously in the UK and the US is a mammoth achievement, isn't it? I mean, there's no two ways of looking at it, even in 2025. But we all now live in our own little worlds, don't we? And curate our world. But anyhow, who else is on at the Co-op Arena? I hear you ask. Well, thanks for asking. Chris Brown is on, but you know. Why? I don't know. Stevie Wonder's on. We've all heard of him. He's enormous. Hasn't had a hit for 40 years. The Electric Light Orchestra are on.
Yes.
Billie Eilish is on. She's genuinely big in the here and now, isn't she?
Yep.
Drake. We all know how much I'm looking forward to that now. Lady Gaga. She's a genuine superstar, isn't
Yeah.
she?
Oh yeah.
Bruce has just played 2 or 3 nights. Haim, Duran have come to visit us from the past, which is nice. Sabaton. I know. I remember seeing Sabaton in Academy too when they were just starting out, and look where they are now. Jason Derulo and classical music's Andre Ryu. But also, I'm astonished that acts that the kids that I teach like Pierce the Veil and Ice Nine Kills, are both playing the Co-op Arena this year.
Oh, yep.
And you know, wow, if you don't know who Sleep Talking are, you're not going to know who they are, but they are playing in normal domes. And so are the Doobie Brothers, but we'll come on to them very shortly. So yeah, the way that we define success has changed now, hasn't it? You know, anyone can get in the top 10 these days with a good promotion push, can't they? Album wise.
Yep.
It's not like the most difficult thing in the world, but live shows are where it's at, and there are some interesting acts playing large venues. Like you said, Stephen, some of these acts playing venues that they would never have played before, and you would think you've never had a hit.
Yeah. To
You
to
know,
go off
go
on
on.
a tangent, okay, and this is Tangentville already tonight. But I had a conversation back and forth with somebody on the Kiss forum, okay, about the fact that rock is dead. Gene Simmons is right, rock is dead. It's dead. It's totally dead. Nobody sells out of Norma Domes. Nobody knows who these rock stars are now because, like, Gene Simmons and Steven Tyler were household names before. They weren't really. They were in a very small, narrow sort of thing. And if you live in that world, you think they're massive and famous.
Oh yeah.
You don't need to now. The younger music audience isn't looking at album sales. They're not watching MTV. They're not interested in what's on a video. It all lands in their hand through one of these things.
And they're not even maybe listening to albums either, right?
No. So it's TikTok and all this sort of stuff. You consume and learn about music in a completely different way. And the bands and the labels and the platforms are not aiming the new bands at people like the three of us. And neither they should. Because back when we were young, the bands that we loved and still love were not aimed at our parents. That was the whole point. Music isn't meant to be. I mean, and you can and you do, and I go and see bands where I think, my God, I'm old because I'm the oldest person in the venue. But I also go see bands still where I think, wow, haven't I young? And I can do that in the space of a week just because that's the way that we love music. But in terms of consumption, They don't give a shit if everybody knows who they are now. It's not about that. It's not important. If you can be Sleep Token, headline download, and play, I don't know, pick a number out the air, 7 shows around the UK, and every one of them was a 10 to 20,000 person venue and sell them all out. Does it matter if somebody watching BBC One knows who you are? No. It's a different game now. Anyway, sorry.
Plus, nobody's watching BBC One.
Well, there is that, to be fair, absolutely.
No,
And that shows my age. There's
yeah,
the
also,
relevance.
well, oh, just struck me, Ghost absolutely fits
I
into
was
this,
just
don't
going to
it?
say
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
they're selling out 20,000 seat arenas here now
Yeah.
all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Do I hear Ghost on the radio? Do I see Ghost? I don't know. All of a sudden, Ghost plays live and people go.
Yeah.
They go in droves. I don't know if they're buying their albums or I don't know what's going on, but Ghost is immensely popular here in a live context, big time.
It used to be that if bands played the biggest venue in your country, town, city, whatever it was, most people knew who they were. Most people, even if they hadn't really heard them, they could picture an image of pick a band, and they roughly knew what. It's a completely different game now. Completely different game. Bands selling out ginormous venues, and you mention it to your people at work and whatever, and they all go, "Who?"
Yeah,
To the
happens to me
extent
all
I've
the time.
actually gone these days, I will actually say, people say, "Oh, who are you going to see?" And I'll go, "Oh, I'm going to see Sleep Token." Who? Because it saves them doing it.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting concept. All right, so moving on. We've mentioned them a couple times, but let's fully talk about them now. Kansas is the next band. So Kansas's first 7 albums all went gold or platinum plus here. Now, again, we kind of talked about this a little last week. So these first 3 albums didn't really do all that well when they first got released. They were kind of struggling as a band. Then they released Left Overture. This goes multi platinum. And then all of a sudden, boom, everybody goes back to these and buys these up, and these then go gold or platinum. That happens here a lot, especially back in the day. They followed up that with this, Point of No Return. This also went multi-platinum. They did the live album, which was also multi-platinum. And then their last certified album was Monolith. I think this only went gold. So really a run of 7 studio albums, right? 7 studio albums, 1 live album, or 7 albums in total, but no charts, no certifications in the UK. They also didn't do their first major tour of Europe until 1978. So this is basically after Point of No Return. So they waited till they got really big and said, all right, let's go over there. They mainly played here. Also, I'm going to throw this out here. This is not something you can look up. This is based on conversations I've had and people in the chat and in comments on this YouTube channel. Many people from the UK who are progressive rock fans going back to the late 60s, early 70s have always seen Kansas as a knockoff of classic UK prog bands. They don't see them really as prog, they don't see them original. And they've said there's too much American stuff in their music, like violin and acoustic guitars. And they've had some singles and they do have some boogie songs on their early albums. They're not really prog. They learn whatever they learn from Genesis, yes, ELP, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And so they don't really consider them to be in this space of all these other grand and majestic and legendary prog bands from Great Britain. So I think all of that has to do with lack of success over there. Um, I don't know, was Carry On Wayward Son or Dust in the Wind, did they make any sort of an impact over by you at all? I don't think so. Not like here. Both of those songs were huge here, still played to this day. But yeah, this was a band that caught the attention of people mainly for their albums because those are the only 2 hits they had. And people bought these albums but they toured here relentlessly. So of course that works, right? You got to get in front of people and you work a territory and you work it well, and that's what they did. But I think because they played over in your neck of the woods a lot in more recent years, but it's many years after their heyday. So curious to see what you guys think on the Kansas front.
I'm going to call you out on they play over here a lot in our neck of the woods these days because I've never seen them because they come and play London once and go away again.
Yeah, very infrequent.
Yeah.
But Carry On My Wayward Son wasn't a bona fide hit at all. But crucially, was on every compilation album
Yeah.
that mentioned AOR, melodic rock, or general, anything that had an American flag on it did have "Carry On My Wayward Son" on. It
Yeah.
is it is it is a known song over here,
Okay.
and I would
Yes.
suggest it's the only known song by Kansas over here. But you are so right, he said. You ever get in a room with people that really like prog rock in the UK? Once they've got the camera card out and they've bought a pint of old bollocks. There's only one sort of prog. It's English.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then at that point you say, "Well, I've really got to go home now." Yeah,
I mean, I get that they're very American sounding. They are, but it's always the argument, and I've gotten into it with people who are like, you know, it's yeah, maybe you can call it American prog, but we don't call it prog. That ain't prog. The only real prog is British prog, UK prog, whatever they forget about bringing up the Italians or anything else. Just like prog originated from the UK. That's the only true prog, and whatever the hell it is Kansas is doing, it ain't prog rock. It's like, okay.
I'm going to get involved in this now because I can't help myself because I do think there is such a thing as US prog.
Of course there is. Yeah.
Okay, and it doesn't sound like UK prog, and
No.
it shouldn't. And why should it? And that's all good. Okay,
Just
but
like just like Japanese prog doesn't sound like
no, no. But if you
prog.
pick up a Genesis album pre when Gabriel's there, let's
Yeah.
say, okay, you pick up an early Yes album, there's not really a blues song on there, is there?
No.
There's not really a straight ahead rock song on there, is there?
No.
So I can take some agreement with are Kansas a prog band? They don't care. That's the difference with Kansas. Is it's not that there's not prog there. Okay, they're very progressive at certain points. To me, are they a prog band? Yeah, when they feel like it. Now that's a strength in my book. I love these albums. I've got all of them. I absolutely adore Kansas. Okay, are they a prog band? Yeah, sometimes. But that's a strength, but not to everybody. Because music, certainly, I would say maybe more so back in the 70s, 80s than it is now, it's very territorial. Do you like rock? Yeah, yeah. But what sort of rock? Oh, I see, I'm at prog rock. I'm a heavy metal guy. And it was very much kind of like that. I mean, and people now admit that it all crossed over and punk guys really were into prog and all this kind of stuff. But that wasn't really what was done back then. And therefore, if Kansas are kind of like, well, we don't want them, but we don't want them. Well, they're not in my band. They're not in our group of music. Well, don't know.
And then I've spoken to people who are like, well, they had too many hits. The prog bands don't have hits. It's like I recall Emerson, Lake and Palmer having plenty of hits. I've heard Genesis on the radio many times, roundabout by yes, hello, right? So that argument doesn't really cut the mustard either, right? But yeah, to your point about them not, they because I know Kansas has played lots of festivals in more recent years. They probably will come and play the Hammersmith or whatever. But you mentioned they never come to Scotland,
They never really go beyond London. They play
right?
like a show.
So yeah, that's it, right? So they do the one stop there, go play a couple festivals, and come back home probably,
Yeah.
or go to Germany or go, wherever. Yeah.
I mean, and there's not, and here we go, I'll undo my own argument. It's not a massive prog audience in that sense here. So I can see why they do it. I mean, if they played up in Scotland, would they sell out big venues? Doubt it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well.
Is there a thing about all these, particularly American bands that we're talking that didn't make it over here, that apart from the fact they're a bit arguably faceless and corporate, which is what they were always described as over here, but the cast of characters are so interchangeable as well. So if you did know them, it's a different one next week, especially in later years.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's
I
true.
think that applies with Kansas quite a bit. I think your main, and we can talk about Journey too here. Steve Walsh was probably the main kind of focal point of the band. And then he left and he came back and he retired and whatever. But I would think that Journey, from that whole image perspective, are far less faceless than a lot of these other bands. Because, Neil Sean had the look. Steve Perry had the look. They to me, show that back cover again.
Yeah, see, because what I was going to say was they had the look, but it's not in the UK. It's not
No,
there.
no, no. It's a totally American style look. Yeah, I mean, you got the
Yeah.
shirts open and the jewelry, and I mean, they look like a bunch of pretty boys, right? But they
And but
certainly don't have the Slade or the status quo look, right? I'll tell you that.
they're not pretty either. But yeah, I take your point.
And they
I
went on
don't,
to like,
I don't know what
sorry.
Simon means, though. I mean, we know that's Journey, but if you're not into the music, that could be in the 70s, many bands.
It could be Foreigner, it could be Van Halen with a couple extra members, right? Who the hell knows, right? Yeah, exactly.
And didn't they go on to look even more ridiculous when half of them turned up in bad English? Oh my God! Wow.
But at least they knew how to roll their sleeves up on their suits by that stage.
True. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
All
Anyhow,
right.
it's nearly midnight, so
Yeah, I know. We
Yeah,
better
man, I tell you, this is
let's
the
do the
same problem
second
we had
one pretty
last week.
quickly here.
It's a good topic. I mean, that's, all right, we'll motor through the rest of these folks. Trust us. We will.
is it me?
It is, yes, indeed,
I
Simon.
can
Yeah.
Yes.
motor. I can motor. Okay, so I've practically said much of this. The Doobie Brothers, a very interesting band, or not, if you are Steven Reid. Okay,
I was gonna say.
there you go. I've been paying attention. I know what you do and what you don't like, Stephen. Um, Doobie Brothers, kind of like we're country rockish to set off with, but that's never really been a big thing over here, has it? That kind of, apart from Thegals, everyone loves Thegals, don't they? Yeah, and they'll be back in our story in a minute. Um, not really a thing over here. And their big period was arguably around about just before, punk and new wave and stuff. Couldn't be asked to come to the UK till 2025. They really just couldn't. Actually, they came last year as well. Virtually never on the radio. Apart from randomly hit the charts not long with train long term running, not that long. Well, I say not 20 years ago. It's not seldom on the radio, and yet in America they were huge, weren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really huge. So
Very
many
consistently big. Yeah. Maybe not mega big, but consistently big selling band.
consistently churning out the big hits. Whereas over here they had some silver albums in Taking It to the Street, Stampede, What Were Once Vices. They kind of. But no sustained periods, no sustained. Whereas everything up to Cycles, which is one of my favorite records. I love this record. I just wanted to show it because I've got it. Um, was we all went at least gold in the States. But over here, couldn't get arrested.
Hmm.
But now, my friends, whilst they're touring the unfeasibly good Walk This Road record, there's the camera. What a good record this is.
It is.
Although they're not all on it all the time, which is interesting in and of itself. McPhee's just barely on it at all, is he?
I know. Yeah, I know.
He's probably like, searching out your computer and stuff. Well, that's happening. Wrong McPhee. Okay. But they are playing the Co-op Arena, which holds 20,000 people I cannot comprehend that because last year they supported Thagles. So last year they were supporting, yes, they were.
Is this a bit like when bands play the Hydro in Glasgow and you go, wow, how do they play a venue that holds 12, 15,000 people? But that's sometimes because across the top they draw curtains and it's not really. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. They are playing in Manchester in 2 weeks' time on the same night as Leonard's. What now passes for Leonard Skinner is playing the AO Arena. Tickets still available, apparently. But what are doing, and we've had this conversation, have we not, Steve? They're bringing Blackberry Smoke in support. And the last time Skinner appeared in the UK, equally haven't had any actual hits in the UK. They had the Quo in support. And the last time I saw the Quo before that, the Quo were headlining that venue. And now
Yeah,
they're in.
yeah. So who's selling what tickets? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. But as far as I'm aware, the Doobies do not have any support um, on at the Co-op Arena. But you look at their list of albums and their hits. You know, when people actually used to buy records, they didn't buy the Doobie Brothers in the UK, but they are playing some really big venues, and I find that interesting and perplexing. And I would have gone if they weren't playing on the same night as me being somewhere else as well. Yeah. And yet, a few years ago, when they came across without Michael McDonald, I roughly did this: 38 quid a ticket, get lost. Now, 38 quid used to be a lot, but now you basically pay for a pub gig for 38 quid. So yeah, but band that never meant much over here, but now playing enormous venues. Is it because people of our age have too much money, too much disposable income? Is that what it is?
That might be a lot to do with it in those terms. Yeah, yeah, they've sussed that people our age will just pay it.
Yeah.
Or are they worried this may be the last time they'll get to see them because they're all getting so old? I mean, that's taken into consideration too, that
Well,
a lot of these people are dropping like flies, right? So
it's not bothering Lynyrd Skinner from turning up in 2 weeks'
no,
time.
not at all. We'll just keep replacing them and yeah.
You know, Foreigner are still touring, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we've announced we're not stopping. Yeah. Well, you guys are not. What about foreigners?
So yeah, the Doobies meant really nothing over here
A
because
Wonderful, Believe,
people
Listen
were
to
like
the
Steven,
Music. None of those songs made much of an impact over there.
known songs, but just
Not
not hits. They were radio hits, which is why everybody think, oh yeah, they were popular, but not massively
sometimes
popular.
radio hits don't translate to album sales. I mean, it just
Exactly. But
generally
people
does
people
here,
know
but
them, because there was a time, and I think this is one of the reasons why things have changed, that we all had, so certainly over here, the same shared experience. We all watched Top of the Pops Thursday night. We all saw, I don't know, Adam Ants next week is number one.
Yep. Yeah.
That
True.
experience does not happen anymore at all.
Mhm.
Even something really big like Glastonbury was last weekend, wasn't it? You can pick and choose what you're watching. I'm going to watch Olivia Rodrigo on the iPlayer. I'm not going to watch Neil Young because they didn't put it out on the iPlayer. I'm going to watch Supergrass. I'm not going to watch whoever's headlining on that one. So even then you're completely siloing yourself out. And yeah, the big sets were shown in their entirety, slightly delayed, weren't they?
Yeah.
So, the modern world is um, really hard work. I don't like it, but that's so. Yeah,
it goes back to that whole concept we were talking about. It even though it's the UK, it's London, whatever, right? Everybody knows about it. Whatever, it's prestigious part of the world and country and whatnot. But yet, if we'll use the Dewey Brothers as an example, if they go on Top of the Pops and they nail it, and a lot of people watch that, and then tons of them go out to buy that record the next day. What is Silver? Is that 60,000 units sold?
Something like that.
yeah.
Not a lot, really, right? So for that to translate here in the States,
These days it's about eight units, isn't it?
yeah. Because the population is so much smaller. So like
Mm.
you can have somewhat of a bit of a success, but when you kind of match it up against, a much bigger market like the US, right? So Doobie Brothers will go and they'll sell 2 million copies here. That's because they're out touring state after state after state, city after city. You have to do that in order to generate that kind of revenue, those kind of sales. I don't know. That's why it's hard to compare sometimes because of the size disadvantage that the UK has over the North
But
America.
because we as a nation always sort of think about British exceptionalism and things like that. Um, to be able to say you've made it in the UK is still a thing, isn't it? It's still like important because we still think that we are the be all and end all.
Yeah.
Which is why, like last week I was saying, the big in Germany, that's hilarious. Well, actually, if you're big in Germany these days, you're selling quite a few records, aren't you? And you can tour big venues and everything's hunky dory, whereas,
Yeah.
you know, less so over here. So yes.
Saga, we're talking about you, Saga. Huge in Germany, can't do diddly squat anywhere else, unfortunately.
German in the Netherlands. That's all they need.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
I mean, so my last choice, and this goes back to what I said earlier. If you don't like this band, then I don't really care. People get really hung up about, oh, but they're talking about Kiss again. In the topic, okay, Kiss were not big here. I know why. Okay, but they were big in the US, are big, whatever way you want to look at. Now, if you believe Kiss, I mean, they sold 65 billion albums in the space of 3 days. So this is all relative, okay? There's a narrative here that's a whole load of bullshit. But they did genuinely sell an awful lot of albums. Okay, they sold 25 million albums in the US, 30 gold albums, 8 platinum or double platinum. And if you want to include the solo albums, some people do, some people don't, you can make that 12 platinum or double platinum albums in the catalogue. That's a lot of album sales.
It is, yeah.
You know? They were also reasonably big elsewhere. They were massive in Australia in the early 80s for about a minute and a half. Do you know, it's all kind of, it's relative in those terms. But Destroyer got to number 22 here. Lick It Up, decade later, got to number 7. Crazy Nights got into the top 20. We're talking big gaps here. Okay, Destroyer's the album, studio-wise. Then there's a couple of hits that drive those other albums. And realistically, not much else. Now, why would that be? Lyrically, they're remarkably US-centric.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they talk about New York, they talk about rocking in the USA, I'm an American man, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily translate. And that, I mean, it is quite genuine because these are the people that they are. They're just talking about their own experiences and a lot of bullshit along the way. Now, last week, I mentioned Slade. Okay, and I showed out how they looked and all that kind of stuff. Roughly the same time, this is what the US called glam rock. So Slade were called glam rock here, wrongly in my humble opinion. If you want to talk about an image, okay, they're more of a rock band with a quirk and a guitarist wearing a pastiche of this guy's outfit, vice versa, whatever you want to look at, okay, because I'm not going to talk about who was first and who was last. It's about who's doing the larger than life, pardon the pun, kind of thing. But I think you also have to factor in that in the 70s, the UK was, with a small c, quite a conservative place in that sense. Okay, I mean, you won't know who Mary Whitehouse is, Pete, but she was one of these people, it was like the PMRC. She was one of these people that, oh no, Doctor Who's on the television. Oh my goodness, isn't that frightening and scary? Let's put all the children in bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was the kind of thing that was going on. I mean, she would have blown a gasket if this guy turned up on the
Oh,
telly.
of course, of course.
You know, she was upset about the merest, minus little thing. Look at that, he's got blood on his face. Do you know, and to get into Kiss, well, boom. Really, do you know, they didn't do it here. Didn't do it here. So you factor all of those things together, and it made me think of something else. Seeing as this is the last one I'm going to talk about in this show, I turned it on its head. And I did it too late today because I don't have a scientific thought. Literally just before I came through and sat down and set up, was should the question be, if you want to look at 1970s US rock bands, who did make it over here? And that's the question. Because arguably we had, and let's be pompous about it, so much great rock music here in the 70s, we didn't really give a shit what the US was doing. Once we hit the 80s, wow, it's all changed. It's all changed. Everyone here is chasing what's happening in the US. All the US bands are ginormous here. UK bands trying to get into that sound can't get arrested. It all completely turns on its head. But when I really sat for 10 minutes and thought, and they are there, the Eagles, right? But I'm talking like rock bands in the 70s, who made it here? And it was only really late today that I kind of thought, hold on a minute, I'm not sure I can really come up with many. But when I looked at the AOR thing and thought, well, Johnny didn't really, Foreigner didn't really, argument they're not a US
I'm thinking
band.
like Aerosmith, right? I'm trying to think of some of the other big American bands here. Heart, Kiss. I mean, that's
They all had some
Nugent.
success, but not sustained success, didn't they?
Right.
Yes.
And they all often had them with outside writers, didn't they? Aerosmith didn't write "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing," to my knowledge, did they?
And that's the thing. Heart had big success, but
Yep.
after in the verticals, after the heyday,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, arguably it's probably when they sold most albums across the world. But I think we'd all agree, if you like Heart, the prime time is prior to that. Aerosmith broke here after they were at their peak. Kiss broke here after they were at their peak. All of these bands kind of go boom, wow, wallop, decades, not just years, decades after it's really happened. We've just been very slow to kind of go, wow, those bands were quite good, weren't they?
Yep.
Anyway, there you go. That struck me earlier on today was I actually couldn't put my finger on a rock band in the US in the 70s, and I'm sure somebody will down below that I thought, wow, boom, yeah, that's the one. If they could all do that, they'd have been huge.
Yeah, but yet here in this, we had a lot of art, like a lot of the bands we've talked about were huge here, but yet who were like the massive bands coming over here? Zeppelin, the Stones, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Elton John. Those are the big, huge, ELO, right? I mean, all British bands, all
Yeah.
British. Even though the Aerosmiths and the Kisses and Heart and Ted Nugent and Doobies and all these other bands we talked about, Styx, Cans, all really big here. But the massive bands were the British bands here, as
So
far as touring goes.
is it a cyclical thing where you get the UK invasion, okay, the British invasion happens, and then you get that kind of rush of big rock acts, Purple, Sabbath, ELO, all that kind of stuff. And then the US kind of goes, do you know what? We could do that, but we could do it slightly different. So you guys have got your own bands, so you stop being all that worried about what we're doing. So we're still buying all the stuff that we're doing. And then it hits the 80s, and we go, wow, that's bright and shiny. Isn't that nice? I like that. That's much better than this guy in the top hat. I want this guy that's got the shiny thing here. So we start to follow the US. The difference is we've never really stopped. And that's maybe the difference.
Yeah, could be. Could be. All right. Our last band of this conversation is going to be Marillion. So I went and did a little research. I don't know if I've ever actually looked at it from this perspective because I've always assumed that Marillion were more of a cult band here, but I always kind of thought they were like a cult band everywhere. However, the first five albums in this band's career, so we're talking Script, For Jester's Tear, Fugazi, Misplaced Childhood, Clutching at Straws, and Season's End, all went either gold or platinum in the UK. Did not know that. Pretty big. And made the top 10. Every one of those albums was a top 10 album on the charts. Even Holidays in Eden made the top 10, which is a little bit later on. I mean, I'm sorry. Holidays in Eden, Brave, and Afraid of Sunlight all were top 20. These were all top 10. Those were top 20. Not one of their albums has ever certified here in the States. Only Misplaced Childhood made the top 50 here at number 47. It peaked. Now, I think that was due to a couple things. They got on that Rush tour. That was, they played was it 2 nights, I think, at Radio City Music Hall here in New York. That got a lot of people talking about Marillion, this new band, Marillion, who had been around for a couple of years at that point, but new band. Kaylee was released as a single here. That was a very mild hit here. That only made it to number 74. That's, but it was played, but not all that much. But yet, if you go and look at the Marillion singles from the beginning of their career all the way up to into the 2000s, almost every single single that they ever released charted in the UK. Every single one of them, which is crazy. I never knew that. I never knew that. Because you don't really think of, other than like Lavender and Kaylee, do you really think of this band as a singles band? However, Market Square Heroes and Lady Nina and all these, things that they released over the years, yeah, did very, very well over there. Yep.
Did I ever think of a singles band, Pete?
Yeah, I
Yes.
know. I know you do. I think we had a show on that a long time ago, if I remember correctly. You showing all these things. Yep. Yep. They all did very well. And they never bothered to release most of them here. And like I said, Kaylee was really the only one that did anything here. So, for me, I always wondered, overall, I'm not just even talking UK and US, that Marillion and IQ and 12th Night and Palace and all those other bands that kind of debuted in the early 80s as this second wave of progressive rock. Was it too late for prog? Certainly here, I would argue yes. Um, and their music, I don't think was ever really all that tailored for this market, other than people who really like this sort of thing. Kaylee probably comes close, but that really was kind of an outlier in their catalog. They didn't really do a lot of stuff like that. Um, they certainly they would tour here, but not a lot. And when they did tour here, they were playing very, very small venues. They never really got that big break to open up for a big band like Rush again, sadly. They would headline small little places like the Chance in Poughkeepsie, which is no longer there, that holds a couple hundred people, right? That's where they would play. Every time I've seen Marillion here has been a very small venue. Um, so yeah, I was quite frankly a little surprised at how successful they were over on your side. But again, they played the clubs over by you all the time. I mean, they were like regulars on the club scene when they first came up. So they were like very, very active. And I think that really helped their success there by relentlessly playing live even before they had that first album out. So maybe you can probably give a little bit more insight into this because you were there firsthand. But
Yes, I mean, I'm not old enough really to have been there right at the very start in that sense. But yeah, Marillion were chart ready before they'd released anything. They'd built up such a live reputation that they were kind of one of the marquee house bands and all that kind of thing. Um, but there are some interesting things along the way there because really, by the time that we get to Misplaced Childhood, EMI are kind of going, guys, it's hit time.
yeah,
It's hit time or it's bye bye time. And of course, as the story goes, they turned out a concept album, and the label went, and they had hits. So there you go. So there's an
not
awful lot.
1973 anymore, right? Concept albums like this don't work, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the label were
Even though we
appalled.
had The Wall a couple of years before and we had Operation Mindcrime a few years later, but a little bit of a different story here, I think.
Yes. Um, and also, it's interesting because at IQ, Palace, 12th Night, all these bands, they never really did anything, Pete.
Yeah,
Pendragon and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they really are. Marillion were the exception that proved the rule. The
right.
scene was really vibrant, and there were lots of these bands that coulda, shoulda, woulda, but didn't really because neo prog was very niche here, other than Marillion,
Yeah.
realistically, and because a lot of these bands have just continued to release albums against public success, realistically, we now look at a band with IQ that have spent decades building a dedicated following that still can't really play gigs here
Yeah.
because there's not really an audience for it en masse across the country, unfortunately. And it feels like, well, they must have had success. It's been on the go for 20, 30, 40 years. Not really.
Not
They're just
really.
dedicated to what they do more than anything else.
In
But yes,
actuality, they're probably not much different because it came right after. They're not much different than a lot of those kind of mid-tier bands from the new wave of British heavy metal movement, who
yep,
everybody's heard the names, right? But a lot of those bands never had really much of any success
yes. Diamond Head,
other than those couple of them, right?
for example, equal an awful lot of what, I mean, they had more success and more sales than the neo prog bands.
Right.
But it's similar, as in most people in the rock and metal will go, oh, yeah, Diamond Head, yeah, I know them. But they weren't successful
No, not
as
at all.
such
Yeah.
in those terms. And really, Marillion are an outlier here too. How they were successful here makes little sense. Fish has a lot to do with it. As a Dyed in the Wheel, also Hogarth fan, but his personality and ability to look ridiculous but fantastic in a video like Incommunicado had an awful lot to do with it. You had a neo prog rock star for a minute or
Yeah.
two.
Well, I think by that point in time in the early mid 80s, we still had a little bit of carryover from the 70s of that whole idea of the rock star frontman, right? He's arguably one of the last from that kind of era, really, when you think about it. I think that helped quite a bit because you remember when he left the band, I mean, there was like, oh, how can this band carry on without him, right? It's like,
Yeah. And it's taken them the best part of 30 years before, outside of their group of fans, people are kind of going, shit, they're still really good, by the way.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, but,
It's
well,
crazy.
what they did do is they got that group of fans, and once they got rid of people, that oh, Lavender's good, and that's a nice song. My mum will like that. They kept that group of fans, and they kept them, and they said, "Do you think you could help us fund the record?"
Mm.
And they went. Yeah, feel like we could. That was really groundbreaking, wasn't it?
It
Absolutely.
was. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. It was.
They've
Now
just played,
everybody does it now. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think they've done, I'm going to get the numbers wrong here, 7 or 8 Marillion weekends this year. Okay, so I think this was the 13th or 14th one they've done at Port Zealand in the Netherlands, where, and that's the big one. They own the entire park, so it's in a centre park, so it's like it's a resort filled with chalets. They own the whole place for a weekend. They play 3 nights. There's themed sort of quizzes and competitions. You get to run a mini marathon with Mark Kelly, and they do the whole weekend. There's fan interaction on a level that other bands can't even imagine, and I mean they can't imagine because they can't because they just have never thought about it. It's become something else entirely than it has just a band selling records to their
yeah,
fans. It's
yeah.
been a fascinating journey to
But
be.
there's like a community that's been built there between the fans and the band, right?
The fans that do these things go further than that and say it's family
Yeah,
because it's created friendships across the world. It's a completely different concept to we've recorded an album. Would you like to buy it? Completely different. Yeah, but that's kind of removed from what we're doing here in that sense. But it is fascinating what bands have had to do or learn to do or innovate to traverse some difficult times.
yeah. And to keep on keeping on, right?
And
Yeah.
it might not be worldwide success, but it's success on their own terms, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Has meant that they have been an active band.
They're not working in Tesco like so many other bands do.
Yeah, yeah. We still, although we all know better, really, have this lovely idea that if you're in a band that we've heard of and buy albums by, you're a musician that does that all day, every day. And how I wish that was true. It's really not anymore, unfortunately. But
No,
there you
no.
go. World shit.
And I remember because I've spoken to both Mark and with Steve Rothery, and they both said to me that they're happy with the level of success that the band has had, but they're not like big rich rock stars and that have extravagant lives and anything like that. And they're at peace with what they've done, you know?
I would imagine that they are at a stage where they are comfortable, which
Yeah.
I'm delighted by, and they are successful on a great level. They have complete artistic freedom, and they can walk down the street.
Yes.
That is everything, is it not? Really?
Yes. Yep. Yep. Walking down the street without getting stopped by everybody you see is probably a great thing for them. Yeah, exactly.
I would say so.
Yeah. I can't do that in certain places.
I can't either, Simon. So I totally hear. There are some concerts I go to, man, and I'm like, holy moly. It's like I'm just me. It's like, yeah. But so I've experienced enough of that to know what it must be like when it's relentless everywhere you go.
Mm.
That can't be easy. Me and my little happens here, there, whatever is one thing. But like if you like can't walk outside and go to the supermarket to buy a milk and eggs and get molested or go to, get some gas or go out to the mall with your family or something. It's like, yeah, it's got to be tough. That's got to be tough. I'll live with it going to a concert and get stopped by 20 people during the course of an evening. That's one thing, but yeah, it's can't be good. But I guess that's the price you pay sometimes, right? So anyway, that brings to an end to this two-parter episode of bands who were big in the US or in the UK and not in the other territory, right? I think we covered a lot of ground here, some really good discussions, but we've got a completely different show for you next week. Yes, 3 weeks in a row. People, can you believe it? You have to sit through us 3 weeks in a row. It's like the old days here on SOT once again. So, Stephen, you want to talk a little bit about a certain year that we're going to be looking at next year, next week?
Yes, 2014. This is an excellent idea that Uncle Simon came up with quite some time ago now, and we've done, I think, 3 or 4 of these where we kind of turn the spotlight on ourselves a little bit, not on us, but on the music that we liked in a certain year. And we've been working our way through these years and looking at our top tens from these years. So we've reached 2014, and the three of us, and hopefully everybody watching, will go back and review their favourite albums from 2014 and look at it and go, do you know what? These albums are the shit. Or these albums are maybe slightly shit.
Yeah.
Very different ends of the spectrum. And it is fascinating because some of these years we've done, I've looked at and gone, wow, the guy that put this top 10 together, he knew his stuff. These are great albums. And other time you look at it and you go, oh, what was this guy thinking about? And that guy
Yeah.
was always me both times. So yeah, it's a fascinating little thing. And it's not that long ago. And still you look at them and kind of go, what
Yeah.
the fuck?
I think the last one we did, I most of my top 10 I didn't agree with here today, right? In this year. Because and that's yeah, it's I mean, we go through this whole thing every year at the end of the year where we take a look at all these albums we've listened to and reviewed on the webzine or here on the channel, and we're like, all right, we put together our top 20, 30, 50, 100, whatever it is. And then you move on to the next year. And so looking back like 10 years now, and you look at these things you picked all those years ago, and you're like, I don't even know what this album is, but it's my number eight. So obviously, I thought it was great when I first listened to it and reviewed it, and then I forgot about it, right? And sometimes I'll see, like, I think the last time we did this, I saw like five albums that were in like the 30s and 40s and 50s, and I'm like, that's a top 10 album because I'm still listening to those today, and I love them. So yeah, it's a fun exercise for us and for folks watching. If you keep track of these things, it'll be interesting. It's always interesting. I hope to put your list together and see, okay, well, what maybe did I really like back then, but now I don't care about it anymore. But yet this album, which came out 10 years ago, I just bought 6 months ago, and it's great. See, there you go. So that's coming up 1 week from today, folks. So let's see. Tomorrow, it's Saturday. Yes, got to get my day straight here. Tomorrow we've got two ranking the album shows coming up for you tomorrow. I will be doing both of them. Two catalogs with just three albums each. Grand Prix, very cool British hard rock melodic rock band featuring some current members of Uriah Heep and maybe a singer who's played with and sang with Michael Schenker, amongst other people. So that's coming up Grand Prix tomorrow, as well as the great California. They from the Bay Area, Los Angeles. I always forget. Groundbreaking thrash and death metal band Possessed. So three albums from each coming up tomorrow. You did the John Gaffney thing very, very well there, Stephen. So that's coming up tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We've got the Hudson Valley Squares coming up on Monday. So we're going to be talking about some of our favorite solo albums from members of hard rock and metal bands. So that's coming up on Monday. So stay tuned for that. And more, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube all together, all the damn time. I gotta include that in. I gotta get used to saying that. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. All the links to ways to help out the channels down below. So thanks in advance for all your support, folks. And we'll see you in just 1 week here on the UK Connection. For Simon Bray and Steven Reid, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for hanging with us for 2 straight weeks of this cool topic. Put your comments down below, and we'll see you next time here for 2014. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.